So one of the really interesting things we can do at Makers is we can take our high quality barley that we grow on our farms and see it all the way through the entire process to the end user. And what we often find on our large commercial Western Canadian farms is that we really are very separated from the end user at this point. So the neat thing about this whole project was we could do something that we do at a world-class level, which is grow barley, malt it to the specs and within the philosophy of the craft beer world, and deliver it directly to the end user, and then talk about, you know, how is this going, what do you want to see, and that's the whole grain to growler or grain to glass concept. So it's really unique, and I feel super lucky to be able to be part of something like that, where we can actually see our product taken through the whole process and enjoy it at the other end. It's just something that philosophically is very, very rewarding, and it's not something that we replicate anywhere else on our farm. When I was growing up, coming out of high school, my dad, my parents definitely pushed me off the farm, so I still get this once in a while to this day, but I was told at the time, you're no farmer, you better go do something else. Yeah, I was able to work in the physical therapy field for a good 15 years, all the time still having like a finger in the farm. Like I would just take that time off and go seed, and then take the time off and go harvest. So we've got a group of 4 guys that farm together. My dad and Jim have farmed together for 25 years plus. And me and Chad came in about 7 years ago as partners, but we do farm as a collective, kind of pooling a lot of resources. So farming's tough and busy, and there's lots of places that you need to be an expert in, so we've kind of found an ability to kind of piece that all together in as simple a manner as possible.
I'm going to be off and on between here in the office, but if I'm not here, somebody will fill in.
With the malting specifically, so the first time I approached that subject with the guys, I think it was kind of just thought of as like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, he's cost us a lot of sleepless nights, but no, it's fun. He's the new idea thinker, and he saw this in other parts of the country, and he thought this would be a great idea to bring it here. If we don't get pushed, you don't think ahead of the curve, or you don't think outside the box. So I think that's important. He's young and inexperienced, so we have to rein him in once in a while, but it's a mutual effort.
Yeah, so starting a craft malting facility, it was a lot of work. There was no real template for it because nobody in Western Canada had done something like that.
So a few years ago, actually right when I had taken over as the head distiller, I got an email from Matt just kind of putting out feelers. It seemed like he was asking everyone how they would think about a craft malt plant opening up here, just to see what kind of support he would get.
So yeah, it wasn't too much after we were officially open that he was sort of making the rounds, introducing himself to all the local craft breweries and places like that. And you know, he just kind of kept making his face known around here and giving me a couple samples here and there, and eventually I kind of caved in because I was excited to use someone local.
We got our equipment just after harvest, so in October, did our first malt batch in December. It was exciting to get to that point. It's kind of like a flag in the sand of, you know, we got here.
I am Kyle Waldo. I am the head distiller here. The actual idea to start was to be a single malt whiskey distillery. The thing about that, though, is the whiskeys have to sit in barrels for at least 3 years. So kind of to make money in the meantime, vodka kind of pays the bills around here, so that's in and out the door pretty quick. And the single malt whiskey is going to come out when it's ready. The good thing is with the patience for the single malts, having to wait that 3 years, it was kind of easy to wait on his couple years growing and getting everything ready.
It's set up for small scale malting, which is brand new style of equipment, and the barley stays within the steeping tank, one vessel through the whole process. So that's quite a bit different from what the big maltsters do. What they do is they'll have a steeping tank then they'll slurry it down to a germination vessel, and then they'll move it across with augers to a kilning vessel. So there's at least kind of 3 moves during that process. Malting is basically the process of taking raw barley from the field and preparing it for what the needs of a brewer or distiller. So what happens in the malting process is you're basically modifying a really starchy, grassy kernel into a much more simple sugar that the yeast will then be able to use and turn into alcohol. So it consists of 3 main parts. The first is the steeping phase, which is kind of like steeping tea. Basically, you have your barley in water and you're trying to drive up the moisture content to about 45%. At that point, the growing process will start. You'll see some chitting happen and some rootlets emerge, and then you move it on to the germination phase. That's usually about a 4-day phase, and you're giving optimal conditions for the barley to grow. It's going to use the energy inside the kernel to grow the shoot out of the ground. And as it's using that energy, there's biochemistry that changes within the kernel itself. And that's the modification that you're looking for to change a starch into a simple sugar. And then from there, you basically move along to the last phase, which is kilning. And kilning is really where you get to put your creative touches and diversity into your end malt. Kilning will really allow you to, take a base malt and move it along up the spectrum of tastes and colors and add a lot of interest to your end malt.
So a big thing in the craft distilling industry, especially with the whiskeys, your grains really mirrors your grapes from wine. The craft whiskey is really starting to take off, so people are more interested in where it's coming from. They want to know about that grain, the whole process. So with them being local, being really small, each batch, we know exactly where it's coming from.
So traceability is kind of second to none. The rest of the industry pretty much takes barley from thousands of farmers, mixes it together to get a generic spec, and says, okay, this is good enough, and we'll move on through malting. But you really don't know where any batch comes from, who made it, what their philosophy is, or any of those things. Hey, otherwise we'll end up shipping our raw barley to BC. They'll process it there, and then they'll bring it all the way back here. So if we can do it all within 60, 50 miles of the brewery, that's pretty awesome. But so traceability is kind of one of our core tenets, I think. We're able to show people, whether it's the brewers and distillers or their customers, this is the exact field that this was growing on.
Now, and that's kind of the exciting part. Small part of this business is that you can identify the process all the way through, right from the producer. It's sort of that, I think a lot of families and people want that identity of where their food comes from. So the field to the plate or field to the table, so now it's field to the glass. And so I think that's kind of exciting where that could go.
Well, and the malt we brought you today is from batch 16. And so it's Copeland again. It's from the same field. It's about a mile from the malt house as the previous stuff.
My name's Daniel Romans, and I'm the brewmaster here at High Key Brewing Company. It's always a bit nerve-wracking to sort of switch your main suppliers up because you create a consistent product and you want to keep that consistency. But after a few small experiments with his grain, it was fantastic. It tasted great, and didn't take me very long to start switching a lot of my main grain bills towards his product. All right, Matt, here you go. Numbers 5, 6, 7, and 3. So Porgia Flight, these are all beers that actually feature your malt, so that's kind of fun and exciting. Number 3, Jolly Roger, is actually one of our house mainstays, so I've started incorporating your 2-row into one of our mainstays, and it tastes pretty much like it did before, which is fantastic, so it's doing a really, really good job there. It's one of those things where you just kind of look back and go, oh, why wouldn't I start incorporating that, since it's such a nice locally produced product. Matt's a great person, makes a really good product for me, so there's not too much of a risk at this point to start incorporating it into the mainstays because it is a really good quality product.
All of them have the premium pale?
Correct, yeah. And then the pomegranate pale ale actually does feature your light Munich. Like, it's just so close to home. I think that's probably my favorite thing about it, is knowing that the malt that I'm using in my beer, I can go to the field where it's grown and know that that's where it's coming from. And a lot of our customers, we get to tell that story, and they, of course, love that story because we have such a local following in Saskatoon. Everyone here wants local to thrive, so it's pretty awesome.
The design or the value of this project isn't to take a lot of our grain and value add to it because we want to value add to all of our bushels. I mean, that would be great, but it's more to service the local microbrewers and distillers' needs. So the scale is set up to match them rather than the typical Western Canadian farm. Yeah, so the scale of our malting facility is very interesting to me, and it really puts things into perspective about how big Western Canada is and how much food it does produce for the world. Our farm, and as a collective, we farm about 10,000 acres. The plant isn't really scaled for our Western Canadian farm size potential. It's more scaled to the Saskatchewan craft beer scene. And so we actually will get by on about 100 acres of barley a year. And our farm will typically always produce that in-house very, very easily. In fact, we just take the top little cream of the crop and direct it towards that. I've gotten to try so many good things around the province. I think through this project, at least going back to the feasibility stage, I think I've visited every brewery. This is definitely my favorite part of the work day. Yeah. That's a tough life. It's a tough life. Yeah, exactly. So this one is the newest one, eh? Yeah. Okay. I can go to almost every brewery though, and then just like pick out like 2 or 3 that I'm like, those are fantastic beers. Yeah, you could really smell the peaches big time. Traveling around a little bit since we've started this project as well, we've gone to other places and we've done a little bit of like craft beer tourism, I'd say. And it's almost like educational for me now. I can solidly say that Saskatoon and Saskatchewan has a fantastic craft beer scene. And then Pink IPA, this one I know really well. It's one of my favorite beers for sure. The one thing that we do really well is we grow some of the best barley in the world. We can malt it and bring it to the people close to us. So that's always gonna be, I think, our bread and butter. There's lots of like expansion and possibility. New products for sure I have dreamed up. The world's kind of our oyster right now. In the right hand and in the left hand, we're just like working so hard just to keep moving. It's not boring, you know? Like definitely not boring. Like my dream right now is just like to sit in the backyard on the deck and just like be bored. Like that would be amazing.
If you have program ideas that you'd like to see on Max TV Local on Demand, write us at max.local@sastel.com.